The entire second season finale of Foundation exudes a sense of impending catastrophe. Even though the protagonists won't witness the results of their labor, they nevertheless feel a sense of defiance and determination to contribute to the advancement of humanity, even though things are worse than they have ever been. Day has bloodlust after destroying Terminus and gives the fleet the order to visit and destroy any world that is affiliated with the Foundation. Nevertheless, the mark on Hober Mallow's wrist glows and hundreds of Imperial spacecraft burst into flames just as the spacer of the ship initiates the jump procedure. It turns out that Seldon had this whole scheme in mind. The second crisis was technically won by them without a shot being fired thanks to an agreement that Hober Mallow struck with the spacers. The idea was for each Imperial ship to leap into the space occupied by its neighbor. The spacers utilized Mallow, who had to be kidnapped in order for him to provide an onboard spacer with the jump sequence encrypted in his wrist mark. The fleet spacecraft all perish, but their sacrifice preserves their species as a whole. Because Cleon is predictable, he fell into the trap set by Seldon and brought his entire fleet looking like a fool. As expected, the powerful Emperor, the Unbreakable One, resorts to fighting Hober Mallow with his hands before Rios and Constance punch him. After a brutal, violent battle, Day launches Bel Rios into space and out of the airlock. But Rose pulls off a cunning prank by turning on the mini-teleporter and switching places with the Emperor. Seeing Day's arrogant expression vanish as he drifts into the emptiness of space and freezes to death by himself is incredibly rewarding. Kerr did get his wish in a sense. They succeeded in their rebellion against the Empire. Even so, every single person in the fleet is dying, a few thousand deaths to preserve billions of lives. With the knowledge that Constance's contagious optimism holds the key to the future of Foundation, Rose and Hober Mallow guide her to the only operational escape pod. Bel Rios and Hober Mallow, who have accepted their deaths, share some of the expensive wine that Mallow has been hoarding for years. Because he stored it incorrectly, the wine tastes terrible. However, Rios managed to force Day out of an airlock, so that must be something. Naturally, Demerzel is not pleased to learn of Day's passing and the fleet's devastation. Adding insult to injury, she still has to cope with Rue and Dusk discovering her secret. Although Laura Byrne has been excellent throughout the season as the murder robot, she really shines in this particular episode, which portrays Demerzel at her most sensitive and emotional. She is furious with Cleon for distorting their past, combining his coercion with communion, and holding her captive out of love. She can't even be certain that her sentiments are genuine because he programmed her to love, and she despises Cleon for it. She misses the kind boy she met and the passionate, honorable man he turned into. In order to frame Sereth and have her put to death, she admits that she hired the assassins. She was unable to express her disapproval of Day's marriage due to her programming. Telling Demerzel that none of them were ever free, Dusk accepts his fate. He gives her a hug and forgiveness. As she moves closer to the two, Demerzel sobs, suppressing her feelings beneath her robotic shell while suppressing stronger feelings than any human on the show. Although she is the main puppeteer, she also uses her own stronger strings to control the puppets. She later informs Dawn about Sereth's treasonous charges. Dawn is skeptical at first, but then he sees the green mark on Demerzel's neck, which is Dusk's final act of retaliation and represents her treachery, much like in the artwork he informed Dawn about. Dawn, who is carrying his child, flees Trantor with Sereth after realizing he is in grave danger. Demerzel sobs when Dawn tells her he hopes she is happy for him and that he always loved her as the mother he never had. In some manner, maybe displaying some real, unprogrammed emotion. She ought to pursue them, but she doesn't, and the couple flees, understanding that even if their child may have numerous problems, they will still adore them. Naturally, Demerzel prevents the Cleonic dynasty from ending there. It has never occurred before, but she thaws out 3 new Cleons at once. Nevertheless, she is not alone since she will learn how to wield the Prawn Radiant that she has. Is this our Daniel Oliva's beginning, or the beginning of something different? A villain more powerful than anyone could have imagined for the show? That is yet to be determined. On Ignis, we find out that Gaul reached a higher level of her psychic abilities, and managed to not only take over the guard's thoughts while he was watching over Hori, and force him to commit suicide, but also to switch places with him, and trick the entire hamlet into believing that Hari Seldon's corpse was there. They are still in danger, despite Talonbon's death. The cult leader takes control of Joja, and makes him kill Gaul before she passes away. But Salver leaps in front of her mother and gives herself up. She reaches out to her mother as she passes away. She informs her it means we're not trapped. Gaul has the ability to save the future and steer it back in the correct direction. Devastated beyond belief, Gaul attempts to interpret the offering. She needs it to have significance. Seldon claims that if we make the losses, they are powerless to stop matter, as if for once they have learned from their experience. People are important because, as we say, they make the rest of us progress. Without Yana, Seldon could not have carried on with his work. Their lives have meaning because we the living refuse to forget them. Erwin Smith said in Attack on Titan, and we rely on our heirs to care for us in the same way as we ride to certain death. Gaul eventually persuades Seldon to put people before maths, and the two spend the following year teaching the Mentalics psychohistory before entering cryosleep, rather than leaving Gaul alone as he gives his life for the scheme. For the next 100 years, they will awaken once a year until they are prepared to face the mule. Now that the second foundation is formally underway. In regards to Brother Constance, she is saved by the vault, which opens and reveals that everyone on Terminus survived, including Constance's father Polly and even Gaul Kerr. She is not saved by a spacecraft though. All along, this was the plan. Terminus made a sacrifice in order for the Foundation to endure. The madman succeeded in performing Seldon's magical disclosure, in which he reveals that everything was always part of his plan. Watching it is really therapeutic and enjoyable, even though it is a little ridiculous and silly. That concludes Foundation's second season. In comparison to the first season, this one has been a huge improvement in television. There's one more thing, so I hope we get a lot more. We leap ahead in time by 152 years. The mule claims that after years and years of dreams, Gaul is finally awake and at his throat. Before she finds her, he will locate her. If he needs to burn everything to destroy her, then he must destroy her. For Season 3, we have an incredible antagonist on our hands. Constance and Hober were a pleasure to be around to the very end. She strikes out at him in her last breath for not allowing her to die a martyr's death. She introduces herself as Hope and asks Hober if he still wants to know. Yes, it is lying, but wouldn't that make for an interesting revelation? Regretfully, it appears that Hober's death means the end of the show's final romance, which is unfortunate.